When I arrived at the property that Saturday morning and found Laura crying in the kitchen, I knew I had made the worst mistake of my life. She was standing in front of the sink, her hands submerged in soapy water, her shoulders slumped as if she were carrying the weight of the entire world. Her hair, usually so well kept, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. The dark circles under her eyes were so deep it looked like she hadn't slept in days. And she was crying silently, the way women cry when they no longer have the strength even to make a sound. Behind her, in the living room area connected to the kitchen, there were at least 8 people. Robert's mother, that woman who, from the first day, looked at me as if I were an obstacle in her way. His 2 sisters, with their shrill voices and their laughs that sounded like mockery. The younger brother with his wife and their 2 kids, who were running wild all over the house. All of them sprawled out on the furniture as if they owned the place, demanding coffee, asking for more toast, shouting that the jam was gone. And my daughter, my Laura, was serving. She was serving as if she were the hired help in her own home. "Laura, where's the sugar?" one of the sisters yelled without even looking at her. "Laura, these eggs are cold. Make me new ones," Robert's mother ordered, in that tone that allowed no reply. My daughter moved back and forth like a ghost, obeying every command, wiping every plate, enduring every contemptuous comment. And I, standing in the doorway, felt the rage begin to rise from the deepest part of my stomach. This was not what I had planned. This was not what I bought this property for. It had been exactly 1 year and 6 months since Laura left her first marriage. It was 18 years with a man who abused her in every way possible without ever raising a hand. He would ignore her for weeks, tell her she was worthless, that she was no good, that she had ruined his life. When she finally found the courage to ask for a divorce, he took everything: the house they had bought together, the savings, even the car I had given her for her 40th birthday. Laura came to my place with 2 suitcases and a shattered soul. For months, I watched her walk around my living room like a zombie, unsure of what to do with her life, unsure of how to start over at age 43. She cried every night, thinking she had already lost her chance to be happy, to have a family, to have a place of her own in this world. And I, as a mother, as a woman who had fought my own battles, decided to do something. I had $45,000 saved up from 30 years of working as an accountant, money I had set aside for my retirement, for my later years, so I wouldn't be a burden to anyone. But when I saw my daughter like that, I knew that money had a more important purpose. I found this small farm property on the outskirts of Atlanta. It wasn't big, but it was beautiful. 2 acres of land with fruit trees, a 3-bedroom house, a spacious kitchen with windows overlooking the garden. It cost $52,000, so I had to take out a loan of $7,000 from the bank, but I didn't care. When I saw the look on Laura's face the day I gave her the keys, I knew I had made the right decision. "Is it mine, Mum?" she asked me with her eyes full of tears. "It's really mine?" "Yours and no one else's," I said, hugging her tight. "A place where you can start over, where no one can ever make you feel less than you are." That day we cried together. We cried with happiness, with hope, with the feeling that things were finally going to get better. I imagined Laura living here peacefully, tending her garden, maybe starting a small baking business like she had always dreamed of. I imagined her at peace. I never imagined this. I never imagined that 6 months later she would meet Robert at a grocery store, that he would be so charming at first, so attentive, so different from her ex-husband. I never imagined they would marry so quickly, just 4 months after meeting. And I certainly never imagined he would bring along this family that had now turned my daughter's refuge into their personal vacation spot. "Alice, what a surprise," Robert's mother said when she finally saw me standing in the kitchen entrance. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were cold as ice. "We didn't know you were coming today." "It's my property," I said in a calm voice, though I was boiling inside. "I can come whenever I want." She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who believes they have already won, that they have everything under control. Of course," she said, getting up from the sofa and walking towards me with the confidence of someone who feels like the owner of the place. "Though technically it now belongs to your daughter and my son, doesn't it? They're married. What belongs to one belongs to the other." I felt my skin crawl. This woman knew exactly what she was doing. She knew exactly which buttons to push. "Laura," I called, without taking my eyes off Rosalind. That was the name of this viper dressed as a respectable lady. "Come here, please." My daughter looked up from the sink. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked at me with a mix of relief and fear, as if my presence could save her, but also make things worse. "I'm busy, Mum," she said in a broken voice. "I have to finish cleaning up breakfast." "Let someone else clean it," I said firmly. "Come here now." Rosalind laughed. She laughed in my face as if I had told the funniest joke in the world. "Oh, Alice, don't be so dramatic. Laura is just helping with the chores. We're family, right? Families help each other out." I looked around the living room. Robert's two sisters were sprawled on the couch watching television, their feet on my coffee table. The brother was out in the yard, smoking without a care. The children had left a mess of toys and food all over the floor, and none of them was lifting a finger to help. "How long have you been here?" I asked. 2 weeks, Rosalind replied, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "And we'll be staying all summer. Robert invited us. He says there's plenty of room, and what's the point of having a property if you're not going to share it with family?" 2 weeks. My daughter had been living this hell for 2 weeks and hadn't told me anything. "And where is Robert?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, although with every passing second I felt the pressure in my chest increasing. "He went out with his father to look at some land," Rosalind replied, settling back onto the sofa as if it were her personal throne. "They'll be back for lunch. By the way, Laura, it's almost 11 o'clock. You should start preparing something. You know my son doesn't like to eat late." Laura nodded silently and began pulling pots out of the cabinet with mechanical movements, like a robot programmed to obey. Seeing my daughter like this broke my heart. This was not the woman I had raised. This was not the strong woman who had survived an abusive marriage and found the courage to start anew. I walked towards her and touched her arm gently. She flinched, as if my touch had burned her, and then I saw something that chilled my blood. She had red marks on her wrists, as if she had been scrubbing dishes and floors for hours without a break. Her hands were cracked, swollen. The nails she always kept perfect were broken and dirty. "Laura, I need to talk to you," I said in a low voice. "Alone." "Alice, why don't you sit down with us for a while?" interrupted one of Robert's sisters, the younger one. I think her name was Angel. "We're watching a great show. Laura can bring you a coffee." "I didn't come to watch television," I replied without even looking at her. "I came to talk to my daughter." "Ugh, what an attitude," muttered the other sister, Martha, just loud enough for me to hear. "Now we know where Laura gets that attitude." I turned around to face her. She was a woman in her mid-30s, with bleached blonde hair and nails so long I wondered how she managed to do anything with them. She was eating grapes from a bowl, spitting the seeds directly onto my wooden table. "What attitude?" I asked in a dangerously calm voice. She shrugged without taking her eyes off the television. Nothing. I'm just saying sometimes Laura gets a little sensitive, like doing a few chores is the end of the world." I took a deep breath. 1, 2, 3 times. I had promised myself years ago that I would never lose control in front of people who weren't worth my time, that I would never give them the satisfaction of seeing me explode. But these people were testing every ounce of patience I had. "Laura, let's go outside," I said, taking my daughter's arm firmly, but gently. "But lunch," she started to protest. "Lunch can wait." I led her out of the kitchen before anyone else could object. We walked towards the backyard, away from the eyes and ears of that parasitic family. Laura walked with her head down, dragging her feet as if they weighed 50 pounds each. When we reached the old swing set I had installed myself the week after buying the property, I made her sit down. I knelt in front of her, ignoring the ache in my 70-year-old knees, and took her ravaged hands in mine. "Tell me," I said simply. "Tell me everything." And then, as if someone had opened a floodgate, Laura began to sob. Not that silent crying I had seen in the kitchen, but a deep, gut-wrenching cry, the weeping of someone who had been holding everything in for far too long. "I don't know how it happened, Mum," she sobbed. "Everything was going so well. Robert was so good to me, so different. He made me feel special, important. He never mentioned his family was like this. He never told me his mother was so controlling," I offered. "Manipulative, abusive." She nodded as the tears kept falling. "When we got married, they only came to visit occasionally. A Sunday here, a Saturday there. Rosalind always made comments, but Robert said that was just her way, that she didn't mean any harm. I tried to get along with her, Mum. I really did." "I know, sweetheart. I know." But 3 weeks ago, Rosalind called Robert, saying she needed a favour, that her landlord had raised the rent on her apartment, and she needed a place to stay while she found something more affordable. Robert asked me if she could come for a few days. I didn't want to, but how could I say no? She's his mother. I felt the anger rising inside me, but I kept quiet, letting her speak. "She arrived with 2 suitcases," Laura continued. "She said it would only be a week, but on the 3rd day, Angel showed up with her things, saying she had fought with her boyfriend and needed a place to stay. Then Martha arrived, saying her apartment was being renovated. After that, Ryan came with his wife and kids, saying they wanted to spend a few days in the country." "And Robert didn't say anything," I stated, not asked. Laura shook her head. "He says yes to everything. If his mother asks him for something, he can't refuse. He says we owe them hospitality because they're family, that this house is big enough for everyone, that I'm exaggerating when I complain." "Exaggerating?" I repeated, feeling the temperature of my blood rise. "Exaggerating when they're treating you like a maid in your own house." "Rosalind says it's my duty as a daughter-in-law to take care of the family. That's how things are done in their family, that a good wife always puts the needs of others first." Laura wiped her tears with the back of her hand. And I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I am the one being selfish. Maybe this is how normal families work, and I don't know it because I only grew up with you. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. My daughter was doubting herself, her worth, her right to be treated with respect in her own home. And all because a manipulative woman had found a way to get inside her head. "Laura, look at me," I said, taking her face in my hands. "Look me in the eyes." She slowly lifted her gaze. Her brown eyes, so much like mine, were full of pain and confusion. "None of this is normal," I said firmly. "None of this is okay. A family doesn't use you. A family doesn't exploit you. A family doesn't make you feel like a stranger in your own house." "But Robert says—" "I don't care what Robert says," I interrupted her. "This house doesn't belong to Robert. This house belongs to you. I put it in your name. Remember? Only your name is on the deed. I made sure of that specifically, so no one could ever take it away from you. When I bought the property, I was very clear with the lawyer. I told him I wanted everything to be solely in Laura's name. Not even I appeared as a co-owner. I had learned from my own marriage 40 years ago that a woman needs to have something that is completely hers, something no one can touch, something that gives her security and power. But we're married, Laura said in a small voice. What's mine is his. No, I said firmly. This house is a private asset that you acquired before the marriage. Legally, it's yours alone, and that means you decide who stays and who leaves. I saw something change in my daughter's eyes. A small spark of hope, perhaps, or maybe of rebellion. I can't kick them out, Mum, she whispered. Robert would never forgive me. And is he forgiving you for being unhappy? Is he forgiving you for crying in your own kitchen? Is he defending you from his family? Silence. A silence that spoke louder than 1,000 words. Where do you sleep, Laura? I asked suddenly, a question that had just crossed my mind. She looked down again. On the couch in the small living room. On the couch and your room? Rosalind said she needed a comfortable bed for her back, and since the master bedroom has the newest mattress. I couldn't listen anymore. I stood up from the ground with a determination I hadn't felt in years. Get up, I told Laura, extending my hand. She looked at me confused, quickly wiping the last tears from her cheeks. What are you going to do, Mum? I'm going to remind those people whose house this is. I walked back towards the kitchen with Laura following my steps. I could feel her trembling behind me, probably terrified of what might happen. But I had made a decision. I had seen enough. I had heard enough. And I was not going to allow anyone, absolutely anyone, to treat my daughter this way. When we entered, the scene was exactly the same as I had left it. Rosalind on the couch like a queen, the sisters sprawled watching television, the children running and shouting unsupervised. The mess was worse than before. There was juice spilled on the floor, crumbs everywhere, dirty dishes piled up on every available surface. Laura, you're back, Rosalind said, without even looking at her. Perfect. I need you to make me some chamomile tea. And make sure it's hot this time. This morning's was lukewarm. I planted myself in front of the television, completely blocking the screen. All eyes turned to me. Excuse me, said Martha, with that spoiled teenager tone. We're watching that. Not anymore, I replied in a calm but firm voice. I found the remote, which was lying among the sofa cushions, and turned off the television. What do you think you're doing? Rosalind stood up, her face transforming into a mask of indignation. You can't just come in here and… I can, and I am, I interrupted her. This is my daughter's house, and I think it's time we had a conversation about the rules. Rosalind laughed, but it was a humorless laugh. Rules? Alice, I don't think you understand how things work. My son is married to your daughter. That makes us family. And family doesn't need rules to visit. Visit, I repeated the word, letting it float in the air. That's an interesting word. A visit lasts a day, maybe 2, maybe a weekend if everyone gets along really well. But you've been here for 2 weeks. That's not a visit. That's an invasion. Angel stood up from the sofa, crossing her arms. Look, lady, I don't know what Laura told you, but we're no invasion. Robert invited us. It's his house as much as hers. No, I said, looking her directly in the eyes. It's not. This house is solely in Laura's name. Robert has no legal right to this property, so technically even he can't invite anyone without her permission. I watched their expressions change: confusion, surprise, and then something that looked like fear in Rosalind's eyes. "That can't be true," she said slowly. "Robert told us the house belonged to both of them. Robert lied to you, or he simply assumed something that isn't true." I turned to Laura, who was standing in the kitchen entrance with wide eyes. "Laura, tell your mother-in-law whose house this is." She swallowed, looking between her mother-in-law and me. I could see the internal battle on her face, the fear of confronting this woman who had dominated her for weeks. But then, something shifted. I saw her shoulders straighten a little, her chin lift barely an inch. "It's mine," she said, in a shaky but audible voice. "My mother gave it to me before I met Robert. It's only in my name." The silence that followed was dense, heavy. Rosalind looked at both of us as if she was recalculating the whole situation. I could see the gears turning in her head, searching for a new strategy, a new way to manipulate the situation in her favor. "Well," she finally said with a forced smile, "that doesn't change anything, does it? Laura wants us here. She's so sweet, so generous, not like some other daughters-in-law I've known who are selfish and petty. She understands the value of family." She was using the oldest weapon in the book, guilt, making it seem like any objection from Laura would mean she was a bad person, a bad wife, a bad daughter-in-law. "Laura," I said, without taking my eyes off Rosalind, "do you want these people to be here?" There was a long pause. All eyes were on my daughter. I could see her struggling with the answer, how years of conditioning from her first marriage told her she had to be nice. She had to please everyone, that saying what she really thought would make her a horrible person. Laura began in a weak voice. "The truth, sweetheart," I said softly. "Just the truth." She took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was stronger. "No, I don't want them here." Rosalind gasped as if she had been slapped. Angel and Martha looked at each other with expressions of shock. Even the children stopped running for a moment. "You can't be serious," Rosalind said. "After everything we've done for you, after accepting you into our family, after my son saved you from being a divorced and lonely woman." And there it was, the true face of this woman. Not the sweet, manipulative tone, but pure venom. "Saved?" I repeated, feeling my own voice finally find its power. "Your son didn't save anyone. Laura didn't need saving. She had her own house, her own life. If anyone benefited from this marriage, it was him. How dare you?" Rosalind took a step towards me, her eyes blazing. "My son is a good man. He works hard. He's the one who pays the bills for this house." "What bills?" I asked. "The electricity, the water, because I imagine with 8 people living here, those bills must be pretty high lately." She opened her mouth to reply, but quickly closed it. I had hit a nerve. "Laura," I said, turning to my daughter, "who has been paying the utilities since they arrived?" She looked down. "I have. Robert says his money is tight this month because he's saving for a project." "And the groceries?" "This house was full of food when I left 3 weeks ago. Now I see the pantry is almost empty." "I did the shopping," Laura admitted. 3 times this week, almost $800 in total." $800. My daughter had spent $800 feeding this family of freeloaders in 2 weeks. "And have they contributed anything?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Laura shook her head. I turned back to Rosalind with a cold smile. "So let me see if I understand correctly. You all came here, moved into my daughter's house, have been eating her food, using her utilities, sleeping in her bed, and on top of that, you've turned her into your personal maid. And all this without paying a single cent." We're family, Rosalind repeated, but now her voice sounded less certain. Family doesn't charge each other. You're right, I said, nodding slowly. Family doesn't charge, but family also doesn't exploit. Family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't turn your home into your prison. This is ridiculous, Martha interrupted, getting up from the couch. Mum, you don't have to listen to this. When Robert gets here, he'll put these two in their place. Robert won't do anything, I said with a certainty that surprised even Laura, because by the time Robert gets here, you won't be here anymore. The room fell into complete silence. Even the children had stopped moving, sensing the tension in the air. What did you say? Rosalind asked slowly, dangerously. You heard me, I replied. It's time for you to pack your bags and leave. All of you. Rosalind looked at me as if I had gone crazy. Then she let out a dry, humorless laugh, full of contempt. You can't kick us out, she said, crossing her arms. This isn't your house, Alice. It's your daughter's and my son's. And as far as I know, my son has as much right to be here as anyone. Your son can stay if Laura decides, I replied, but you are not welcome. And who's going to kick us out? Angel asked with a mocking smile. You? A 70-year-old lady? Please. I approached her slowly, looking her directly in the eyes. She was taller than me, younger. She probably thought that gave her some kind of advantage. But I had lived 70 years in this world. I had raised a daughter alone after my husband died, when Laura was only 5 years old. I had worked in offices full of men who thought they could intimidate me. I had survived losses, betrayals, and pain that this spoiled child couldn't even imagine. Be careful about underestimating older women, I said in a low but firm voice. We've survived too much to be afraid of people like you. Angel took a step back, her smile wavering. Laura, Rosalind said, ignoring me completely and turning to my daughter, you're not going to allow this, are you? You're not going to let your mother come here and cause problems in your marriage. Think about Robert. Think about how he'll feel when he knows you kicked out his family. And there it was again. Manipulation. Emotional blackmail. The way to make Laura doubt herself. To make her feel guilty for wanting peace in her own home. I saw Laura open her mouth, probably to give in, to apologize, to say that everything was fine. But before she could speak, I intervened. Robert can feel however he wants, I said. But he will have to understand that his wife deserves respect in her own home. And if he can't understand that, then maybe he needs to ask himself what kind of man he is. Are you trying to destroy their marriage? Rosalind accused, her voice rising in volume. That's what you're doing, isn't it? You never liked that your daughter found someone. You always wanted to keep her dependent on you. That accusation was so absurd it almost made me laugh. Me, who had spent my life savings to give my daughter independence. Me, who had worked double shifts for years to make sure she never lacked anything. Me, who had prayed every night for her to find someone who would truly make her happy. I'm not going to dignify that with a response, I said simply. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave this property. 1 hour, Martha screamed. Are you crazy? We have suitcases, boxes. The kids have toys all over the house. Then I suggest you start now instead of continuing to argue. Ryan, who had been quietly smoking in the yard this whole time, finally came in. He was a heavy-set man in his 40s, with a beer belly and a perpetually bored expression on his face. What's going on here? He asked, looking between his mother and me. This woman is kicking us out, said his wife, a thin woman with a high-pitched voice who hadn't opened her mouth until now. Can you believe it? She's kicking us out. Ryan looked me up and down, sizing me up. I could see the contempt in his eyes, the way he assumed he could intimidate me just because he was a man. just because he was physically bigger. "Ma'am," he said in a voice that tried to sound threatening, "I think you're a little confused. This is my brother's house, and we are my brother's guests, so you have no authority to tell us anything." I took my cell phone out of my pocket, a simple gesture, but it made everyone tense up. "What are you going to do?" Rosalind asked suspiciously. "Call the police?" "Don't be ridiculous. They won't do anything. We haven't committed any crime." "I'm not going to call the police," I said, dialing a number I knew by heart. "I'm going to call my lawyer." I saw their expressions change. The lawyer. That word has power. It has weight. It means legal consequences, documents, official things that cannot be ignored or manipulated with sweet words. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Alice, what a surprise. How are you?" "Hello, Richard," I said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "I need you to clarify something about the deed to the property we bought for Laura last year." "Sure, tell me. The house is solely in her name, correct? Her husband has no ownership rights." "Correct. It's a private asset acquired before the marriage. It is completely in her name." "Why? Is there a problem?" "There are people on the property who refuse to leave when asked to do so. Can my daughter legally demand that they vacate?" "Absolutely, it's her private property. If she asks someone to leave and that person refuses, that constitutes trespassing. She can call the police and they will have to escort them off the property." I looked at Rosalind as she listened to every word coming out of the phone. Her face had turned pale. "What if they are relatives of her husband?" I asked. "It doesn't matter. The law is clear. Private property means the owner decides who can be there and who can't. The fact that they are related to the husband doesn't give them any legal right." "Perfect. Thank you very much, Richard. If I need anything else, I'll call you." I hung up the phone and put it back in my pocket. The silence in the living room was absolute. "Did you hear that?" I asked, looking at each of them. "If you are not off this property in 1 hour, Laura is going to call the police, and believe me, you don't want that to happen. The police are not friendly when they have to remove people who are trespassing." "This is unbelievable," Rosalind muttered. "Absolutely unbelievable. Wait until Robert hears about this. Wait until he knows that his own wife kicked his family out onto the street." "Robert is free to have his opinion," I said. "But this is the reality. His family has abused Laura's hospitality. They have turned her house into their personal hotel. They have spent her money, occupied her space, and treated her like a maid. And now that's over." "We didn't do any of that," Martha screamed. "Laura is exaggerating, as always. She's so dramatic." "Dramatic?" I repeated, feeling the temperature of my voice drop dangerously. "My daughter's hands are ravaged from cleaning and cooking for you. She hasn't slept in her own bed in 2 weeks because your mother appropriated it. She has spent $800 on food that you devoured without contributing a single cent, and you call her dramatic." Martha opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out, because she knew it was true. They all knew it. "Mum," Laura said in a trembling voice from her position at the kitchen entrance, "what's going to happen when Robert gets here?" It was the question that had been floating in the air all this time. Robert, the husband, Rosalind's son, the man caught in the middle of all this. "That depends on him," I replied honestly. "He can get angry. He can try to defend his family. Or he can see this for what it truly is. A necessary intervention to protect his marriage and his wife's mental health." "He'll take our side," Rosalind said with certainty. "My son knows his place. He knows that family comes first." "His family is Laura now," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "When he married her, she became his priority. Not you, her. That's what you think," Rosalind spat. But a son is always a son. Blood is thicker than any marriage certificate. And there was the real truth. This woman's deep-seated belief that her son would always belong to her, that no wife could ever be more important than his mother. It was a battle Laura could never win, not as long as Robert remained tied to Rosalind's manipulations. "You have 50 minutes," I said, looking at my watch. "I suggest you stop talking and start packing." For a moment, no one moved. They all stood there looking at me as if they expected me to back down, to say it was just a joke, that of course they could stay. But I didn't move. I stood there, firmly planted, arms crossed, with an expression that made it clear I would not change my mind. Finally, it was Ryan who spoke. "This is stupid. I'm going to call Robert." He pulled out his phone and dialed. We all waited in silence as the phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. "He's not answering," he muttered, putting the phone away with frustration. "Then I suggest you start packing and explain the situation when he finally does answer," I said without compassion. Rosalind glared at me. If looks could kill, I would have been dead on the floor. But I had faced worse looks. I had faced bosses who yelled at me, doctors who gave me bad news, bank officials who told me I didn't qualify for loans. An angry look from a manipulative woman was not going to make me back down. "Fine," she finally said in an icy voice. "We're leaving. But this isn't over. Robert will know exactly what happened here today." And she turned to my daughter with an expression of deep disappointment. "I hope you're ready for the consequences of throwing your husband under the bus for siding with your mother instead of your marriage." It was her last arrow, her last attempt to plant seeds of doubt and guilt in Laura's heart. And for a second, I saw how it worked. I saw my daughter's eyes fill with fear, her shoulders slump. "Laura isn't throwing anyone under the bus," I intervened, before Rosalind could do more damage. "She's defending her right to live in peace in her own home. If Robert has a problem with that, then the problem is his, not hers." Rosalind let out a dismissive sound and headed towards the master bedroom, the one she had occupied as if it were her own. Angel and Martha followed her, murmuring among themselves just loud enough for us to hear words like ungrateful and terrible. Ryan stayed for a moment longer, looking at me with something that seemed between respect and resentment. "You know you're going to cause a family war, right?" "If defending my daughter causes a war," I replied calmly, "then so be it." He shook his head and went out to the yard to gather his children's things. His wife followed him, shooting me venomous looks as she picked up toys from the floor. When we were finally alone in the living room, Laura collapsed onto the sofa, her body trembling. I sat next to her and hugged her tight, just like when she was a little girl and had nightmares. "Did I do the right thing, Mum?" she asked in a broken voice. "Or did I just destroy my marriage?" "Sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair, "a marriage that can only survive if you agree to be mistreated is not a marriage worth saving." "But I love Robert." "I know. And maybe he loves you too. But love is not enough if it's not accompanied by respect. And his family doesn't respect you. And worse yet, he hasn't defended you from them." We stayed like that for several minutes, listening to the sound of suitcases being dragged, drawers opening and closing, voices arguing in distant rooms. The sound of an invasion finally being dismantled. "I'm scared," Laura admitted. "I'm scared Robert will leave me, of being alone again, of having failed at another marriage. So listen to me closely," I said, taking her face in my hands so she would look me in the eyes. "If Robert leaves you because you wouldn't let his family abuse you, then he did you a favor, because it would mean he was never the man you thought he was, and you deserve better than that." "But I'm 43 years old, Mum. Who's going to want me at this age? I already failed once." You didn't fail at anything, I interrupted her firmly. Your first husband was an abuser. That wasn't your fault. And if this marriage doesn't work out, it won't be your fault either. The fault belongs to the men who don't know how to value the extraordinary women they have by their side. She leaned on my shoulder and cried. Not the silent crying from the kitchen, nor the hysterical crying from the garden. This was a cry of relief, of liberation, of years of holding emotions in because she had to be strong, because she had to keep the peace, because she had to be the good wife, the good daughter-in-law, the good woman. Half an hour later, we heard the sound of vehicles arriving. My heart sped up a little. Robert had arrived. Laura immediately tensed up next to me, quickly wiping her tears. "It's okay," I said, squeezing her hand. "I'm here. You are not alone." The door opened, and Robert walked in, a medium-height man with hair starting to grey at the temples. Behind him came his father, an older, quiet man who rarely said anything at family gatherings. "What's going on here?" Robert asked, looking at the suitcases piled up in the living room. "Why are you packing? Are you going on vacation or something?" Rosalind came out of the bedroom like a storm, her face red with fury. "Robert, thank God you're here. Your mother-in-law has gone crazy. She's kicking us out of the house." Robert looked at me confused, then looked at Laura. "What? What is she talking about?" "Robert," Laura began in a trembling voice, but I stood up and spoke for her. "I asked your family to leave this property because they have been abusing Laura's hospitality for 2 weeks." "Abusing?" Robert repeated, as if the word made no sense. "They're my family. I told them they could stay as long as they needed." "This isn't your house to be making those invitations," I said calmly but firmly. "What do you mean it's not my house?" His voice rose in volume. "I'm Laura's husband. I live here. Of course it's my house." "Living in a house doesn't legally make it yours," I explained. "This property is solely in Laura's name. It's a private asset she acquired before marrying you. You have no ownership rights to this property." I watched his face change, how he processed this information that he clearly didn't know or had chosen to ignore. That doesn't matter. We're married. What's hers is mine." "Not in this case," I said, shaking my head. "And even if it were legally shared, which it's not, you still don't have the right to invite people who mistreat your wife in her own house." "Mistreat?" Robert turned to his mother. "What is she saying?" Rosalind put on her best innocent victim face. "Of course not, son. We've been nothing but kind to Laura. She's exaggerating, as always. You know how she is." "How I am?" she said. He remained silent, clearly uncomfortable at being caught between his mother and his wife. "I'm exaggerated when I cry because your mother sleeps in our bed and I sleep on the couch," Laura continued, her voice trembling but firm. "Am I exaggerated when I spend all my money feeding your family while you save for a project? Am I exaggerated when I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to prepare breakfast for 8 people and go to bed at 11 o'clock at night after cleaning up everyone's messes?" "Laura, you are being dramatic," Robert said, but his voice sounded less convinced. "No," Laura said, taking a step towards him. "I'm not dramatic. I'm exhausted. I'm hurt. And I'm tired of you ignoring me when I tell you your family is hurting me." Robert opened his mouth to reply, but found no words. I watched him look at his mother, then at Laura, then at me. He was looking for a way out, a way to resolve this without having to take sides. But that option no longer existed. "Robert," Rosalind said in a soft, manipulative voice, "your wife is letting her mother come here to destroy our family. Are you going to allow that? Are you going to let a stranger separate us?" "I am not a stranger," I said in an icy voice. I am the woman who bought this house for her daughter, the woman who is protecting her daughter from abuse. And if you see that as a negative thing, then the problem is you. No one is abusing anyone, Rosalind insisted. We're family. Families live together, help each other, share space. And what have you shared? I asked. No one answered, because there was no answer. I'm asking you, Laura continued, looking at each member of the Torres family. How much money have you put towards groceries? For the electricity? For the water you use in your 40-minute showers? For the gas you use when you leave the stove on all morning? I didn't know you were keeping track, Angel murmured sarcastically. I wasn't keeping track, Laura replied. But when you spend $800 in 2 weeks on food for people who don't even say thank you, you start to notice. Robert, you heard her. $800. Yes, Robert, $800 of my money, because you said your money was tight this month. But it turns out you're not so tight that you couldn't go out with your father to look at some land, which probably meant going out for breakfast and beer while I cooked for your family. I saw something break in Robert's expression, a small crack in his facade that everything was fine. Laura, I didn't know you felt this way, he said in a softer voice. I told you, she replied, and now there were tears in her eyes, but there was also fire. I told you 3 times. The first time you told me not to exaggerate. The second time you told me your father was just trying to help. The third time you got angry with me and told me I was the one with the problem, not your family. Son, Rosalind interrupted, don't let her manipulate you. She's using tears to make you feel guilty. Stop it, Robert suddenly yelled, surprising all of us. That's enough, Mom. Rosalind recoiled as if she had been hit. Clearly, she wasn't used to her son talking to her like that. Did you know Laura hasn't slept in our bed since you arrived? Robert asked his mother, his voice shaking with contained emotion. Did you know she's been sleeping on the couch? Did you even bother to ask her if she was comfortable? I have back problems, Rosalind stammered. I need a firm mattress. I thought Laura would understand. And why didn't you sleep in one of the guest rooms? Robert asked. Why did you have to take our room? Rosalind had no answer for that. Because the truth was obvious. She had taken the master bedroom because she could, because no one had stopped her, because she wanted to establish dominance over the territory. Robert ran his hands over his face, breathing deeply. When he spoke again, his voice sounded tired, defeated. Mum, I think you should leave. What? Rosalind looked at him as if he had just betrayed her in the worst possible way. Robert, you can't be serious. I'm your mother. I know. And I love you. But Laura is right. You have taken advantage of her kindness. And I allowed it because I didn't want to see what was happening. Robert, please. Rosalind's voice was now pure pleading. Don't do this. Don't make me feel like I'm a bad person. I just wanted to spend time with my family. You could spend time with us without moving in here, Robert said firmly. You could visit on weekends. We could go out to eat together. But this... He pointed to the suitcases, the mess, the tension in the air. This isn't a visit. This is an invasion. The words I had spoken earlier were now coming out of her own son's mouth, and they hurt more coming from him. Angel stepped forward, her face red with anger. I can't believe you're kicking us out for this woman, your own family, Robert, the people who were there when you were born, when you grew up, when you needed us. And I'm grateful for that, Robert said, looking at her. But Laura is my wife. She's my family now, too. And you've treated her like an employee in her own house. How did you expect me to react when I finally opened my eyes? You didn't open your eyes, Martha spat. You were brainwashed. That old lady, she pointed at me with contempt, came here to cause problems because she can't stand that her daughter has a life of her own. I took a step towards her. Watch what you say. Girl, I came here because I found my daughter crying in her own kitchen, exhausted, humiliated, treated worse than a dog. And if that seems like causing problems to you, then you have no idea what family means. Alice is right, said a voice we hadn't expected to hear. Robert's father, who had been quiet all this time, finally spoke. Rosalind, what we did is wrong. I knew it from the start, but I didn't say anything because I never say anything. But this time I can't stay silent. Rosalind turned to her husband with an expression of shock. You too. My own husband is turning against me. I'm not against you, he said in a tired voice. I'm against what we did. We took advantage of Laura's kindness. I watched her work like a slave these last few days, and I did nothing to stop it. And I'm ashamed of that. There was a moment of absolute silence. Rosalind looked at her husband as if she didn't recognize him. Her children looked at her, expecting her to say something, to defend them, to somehow turn this into everyone else's fault. But for the first time, Rosalind was speechless. Her arsenal of manipulation, her guilt tactics, her victimization strategies, everything had failed. She was being confronted not only by strangers, but by her own son and her own husband. Finish packing, Robert said finally, his voice firm despite the visible pain in his eyes. You can stay at my old apartment. I still have the keys. It's in downtown Atlanta. It has 2 bedrooms. It's not big, but it's enough until you find another place. I'm not going anywhere, Rosalind said, straightening her back, trying to regain some dignity. If we leave, you come with us, Robert. That's the only option. I looked at Robert, waiting. This was the moment of truth, the moment when he would truly have to choose between his mother's manipulation and respect for his wife. Robert looked at his mother, then at Laura, who was standing next to me with tears running down her cheeks, but her head held high. I could see the internal battle on his face, years of conditioning versus what he knew was right. No, Mum, he finally said. I'm staying here, with my wife, in her house, where I should have been this whole time, defending her instead of allowing her to be treated like this. Rosalind gasped as if she had been slapped. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of helplessness, of knowing she had lost the control she had held over her son for 45 years. You'll regret this, she said in a trembling voice. When she disappoints you, when this marriage fails like her first marriage, you're going to regret choosing a stranger over your own blood. Laura is not a stranger, Robert said, with a firmness I hadn't heard from him before. She's my wife, and if this marriage fails, it will be because I didn't protect her when I should have, not because she wasn't worth it. Rosalind looked at all of us with a mix of pain and fury that seemed to consume her from within. For a moment, I thought she was going to continue arguing, that she was going to launch more accusations, more manipulations. But something in Robert's expression, in the firmness of his stance, made her realize that this battle was lost. Fine, she finally said in an icy voice. We're leaving, but don't expect me to ever speak to you again. Not to you, Robert, and not to you, Laura. You've chosen your path. Now you'll have to live with the consequences. She turned and marched towards the master bedroom to finish packing. Angel and Martha followed her, shooting us looks of pure hatred. Ryan and his wife hastily gathered their children's things, murmuring among themselves about ingratitude and disrespect. Robert's father stayed for a moment longer. He approached Laura and put a hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, he said simply. I should have said something sooner. I should have defended you. Laura nodded, unable to speak through the tears that were now falling freely. He nodded too, and went out to help load the suitcases into the car. Robert collapsed onto the sofa, his head in his hands. I could see him trembling, processing everything that had just happened. He had defied his mother for the first time in his life, and although he had done the right thing, it was clear it was costing him every fibre of his being. I walked over to Laura and hugged her. She clung to me as if I were her lifeline, sobbing against my shoulder. They weren't tears of sadness, not completely. They were tears of relief, of liberation, of years of silent endurance finally coming to an end. The next 30 minutes were organized chaos. Suitcases being dragged, boxes being carried, children crying because they didn't want to leave. Rosalind moved through the house with the wounded dignity of a dethroned queen, gathering every little thing that belonged to her, as if each object were proof of the injustice she had suffered. At one point, Angel tried to take a decorative lamp from the living room. "That lamp stays here," I said in a firm voice. "I bought it," Angel lied shamelessly. "No, I bought it," Laura said, raising her voice for the first time. 8 months ago at that antique store downtown. It cost $120 and I paid in cash. I can show you the receipt if you want." Angel dropped the lamp in a fit of rage and left the house without another word. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, all the suitcases were in the cars. There were 2 vehicles parked outside, Rosalind's sedan and Ryan's pickup truck. The children were already buckled into their seats, still crying and asking why they had to leave. Rosalind walked out of the house for the last time, carrying her handbag. She paused on the threshold of the door, looking at all of us with an expression that tried to be contemptuous, but couldn't completely hide the pain. "Robert," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Last chance. Come with us. Don't let these women destroy our family." Robert, who was standing next to Laura with his arm around her, slowly shook his head. "I've made my decision, Mum. My place is here." Rosalind pressed her lips into a thin line. "Then so be it. But when you realize your mistake, when you see that you chose wrong, don't come looking for me. This door closes today, and it won't be opened again." "That's your choice," Robert said in a calm but firm voice. "I'm just choosing my wife. You're the one turning that into a war." Rosalind did not reply. She simply turned around and walked towards her car, with her back straight and her head held high. Angel and Martha got into the car with her. Ryan, his wife, and their children got into the truck. Robert's father was the last to get in, giving us one last apologetic look before closing the car door. The engines started. The cars began to move slowly down the gravel driveway towards the gate. Laura, Robert, and I stood on the porch, watching them drive away. No one spoke. We only heard the crunch of the tires on the gravel, the sound of the engines, and then silence when they finally disappeared from view. Laura was the first to move. She turned to Robert and hugged him tightly, sobbing against his chest. He hugged her back, his own tears finally falling. "I'm sorry," Robert whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I should have listened to you. I should have defended you from the start. I'm sorry." She couldn't reply, only cried and clung to him as if she were afraid he would leave too. I let them have their moment. I stood on the porch, looking out at the empty driveway, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel happy. I just felt tired, relieved and hopeful that maybe, just maybe, this would mark a new beginning for my daughter. After several minutes, I walked over to them and put my hand on Laura's shoulder. "Are you two okay?" I asked softly. Laura nodded, wiping her face. "Yes, Mum. I think so." Robert looked at me with red eyes. Alice, I don't know what to say. You were right about everything, and I was a coward. You weren't a coward, I said honestly. You were caught between two loyalties. That's not easy for anyone. The important thing is that you finally made the right decision. Do you think I did the right thing? He asked in an unsure voice. She's my mother, my family. Your family is Laura now, I said firmly. And yes, you did the right thing. A mother who truly loves you would never put you in the position of having to choose between her and your happiness. She forced you to choose, not you. He nodded slowly, processing my words. It's going to take time, he said, to reconcile all of this with what happened. I know, I said, and that's okay. Take all the time you need. But in the meantime, take care of your wife. She needs you now more than ever. I will, he promised, looking at Laura with a tenderness that gave me hope. I promise you, Laura, I will never let anyone treat you like that again. I will never ignore you again when you tell me something is wrong. Laura looked him in the eyes. Truly? Truly, he said, taking her face in his hands. You are the most important thing in my life, and I should have shown you that from the beginning. They kissed, a soft kiss full of apologies and promises. And I, feeling that my job here was done, started to walk towards my truck. You're leaving already, Mum? Laura asked, pulling away from Robert. You two need time alone, I said, to talk, to heal, to start over. But will you come tomorrow? She asked in a small voice, still needing my presence, my support. I'll come when you need me, I said, smiling. But for now, this is your house, your space, your life, and you need to live it without your mum watching your every move. She nodded, understanding, but I saw the sheen of tears in her eyes. Thank you, Mum, for everything, for defending me, for not letting me lose myself. I'm never going to let you lose yourself, I said, hugging her one last time. That's what mothers do. We're there in the darkest moments, reminding our daughters who they really are. I got into my truck and started the engine. Before driving off, I rolled down the window and looked at them one last time. Robert, I said, catching his attention, take good care of her. Because if I find her crying in that kitchen again, next time I won't just kick out your family. I'll kick you out too. I wasn't joking, and he knew it. He nodded solemnly. It won't happen again. You have my word. Good. I started the truck and began driving down the gravel road. In the rearview mirror, I could see them standing together on the porch, embracing, watching me drive away. They looked small in the distance, fragile, but also united in a way they hadn't been before. I drove back to the city with my mind full of everything that had happened. My hands were trembling slightly on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the adrenaline that was still racing through my veins. I had confronted Rosalind and her entire family. I had defended my daughter in a way I never thought I would have to do again. And although I felt exhausted, I also felt alive in a way I hadn't experienced in years. When I arrived at my apartment in downtown Atlanta, it was almost nighttime. The streetlights were beginning to turn on, and I could hear the familiar sound of traffic, the voices of neighbors, the urban life that had been my home for so long. I made myself some chamomile tea and sat in my favorite armchair, the one I had bought 20 years ago that knew every curve of my tired body. My phone rang. It was Laura. Mum? Her voice sounded different, lighter, freer. You got back okay? Yes, sweetheart. I'm home, taking it easy. Robert and I were talking, she said. Really talking, for the first time in weeks. He apologized for everything, for not listening to me, for not defending me, for letting his family treat me like that. And what did you tell him? I told him I forgave him, but that things had to change. That if we were going to stay together, I needed to know that he would be on my side when it mattered. That I couldn't feel alone in my own marriage again. And what did he say? He cried, Mum. He really cried. He said he was ashamed of himself, of how he let things get so far. That he had been so programmed to obey his mother that he didn't realize he was betraying his wife in the process. I felt my chest lighten a bit. Maybe Robert really had learned something from all this. Maybe this marriage had a chance after all. I'm glad, sweetheart. Really glad. We're going to clean the house together, Laura continued. The whole house. Change the sheets. Wash everything they touched. Rearrange the furniture. Robert says he wants the house to feel like ours again, not a reminder of what happened. That's a good idea, I said. Sometimes we need to physically clean a space to be able to emotionally heal. Mum, her voice became softer, more vulnerable. Do you think I'm a bad person for kicking out Robert's family? No, I replied without hesitation. You're a woman who finally stood up for her right to live with dignity in her own house. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you strong. His mom said horrible things before she left. She said I had destroyed their family, that I was a manipulator, that Robert would regret choosing me. Those are the words of a woman who lost control, I said firmly. They have nothing to do with you and everything to do with her. Rosalind is used to manipulating her son, to having power over him. When you and I confronted her, that power disappeared, and that terrifies her. Do you think Robert can forgive me someday? I mean, if his relationship with his mother is ruined by this. Laura, I interrupted her. Listen to me closely. You didn't ruin anything. Rosalind ruined her own relationship with her son by putting him in an impossible position. A good mother wants to see her son happy, even if it means taking a step back. She didn't do that. She chose control over love. Those are the consequences of her own actions, not yours. I heard her breathe on the other end of the line, processing my words. Thank you, Mum, for coming today, for not leaving me alone. I will never leave you alone, I promised. But now I need you to be strong, to stand firm on your boundaries, because Rosalind is going to try to come back. She's going to call Robert. She's going to play the victim. She's going to try to manipulate him into feeling guilty. And when that happens, you two need to be united. We will be, Laura said, with a determination that filled me with pride. Robert promised me he won't let his mother manipulate him again. He says he's going to set clear boundaries. They can see each other, but in neutral places and for short periods. Never living with us again. No more surprise invasions. That sounds fair, I said. Robert has the right to have a relationship with his mother if he wants to. But that relationship cannot come at the expense of your peace of mind. We talked for almost 1 hour more. She told me how they had found things hidden all over the house. Belongings of the Torres family that they had intentionally left behind to have an excuse to return. Rosalind's scarf in the closet. The children's toys under the sofa. Angel's toothbrush still in the bathroom. I'm going to pack it all up and mail it to them, Laura said. I don't want anything of theirs here. When we finally hung up, I sat in my armchair for a long time, looking out the window at the city lights. I thought about my own mother, who had died 30 years ago. I wondered if she would have been proud of what I had done today, of how I had defended my daughter. I think so. I think she would understand that sometimes love means being fierce. It means confronting dragons. It means saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. The next few days were quiet. Laura called me every night to tell me how things were going. She and Robert were working on their marriage, truly talking for the first time about expectations, boundaries, family. They were going to couples therapy, something Laura had suggested and Robert had accepted without resistance. The therapist says Robert has what they call enmeshment with his mother, Laura explained to me in one of our calls, that he never developed healthy boundaries between her and him, which is why it's so hard for him to say no. And what does Robert say about that? He says it makes sense, that he always felt he had to please his mother to be a good son, that the idea of disappointing her terrified him more than anything else. At least he's acknowledging it, I said. That's the first step. 1 week after the incident, Rosalind started calling. First, she called Robert directly, but he didn't answer. Then she started sending him text messages, each one more manipulative than the last. Laura read me some. Your father is sick at heart because of you. I can't sleep thinking about how my own son betrayed me. I hope you're happy knowing you destroyed your mother. How does Robert respond? I asked. He doesn't respond, Laura said with satisfaction. The therapist told him not to respond to the manipulation, only to respond when she could talk without trying to make him feel guilty. So far, she hasn't been able to. Good, I said. Maintaining boundaries is the hardest thing, especially at first, but it gets easier with time. 2 weeks later, I received my own call from Rosalind. It was late at night, almost 10 o'clock. Alice. Her voice sounded different, softer, more vulnerable. I need to talk to you. About what? I asked cautiously. About what happened? About my son? About everything? There was something in her tone that made me pause. She didn't sound like the furious, manipulative woman who had left that house 2 weeks ago. She sounded tired, maybe even regretful. All right, I finally said. Talk. I didn't realize, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't realize what I was doing, how I was treating Laura. In my mind, I was just being part of the family, helping, being present. But my husband made me see that it wasn't like that I was being abusive, I completed when she couldn't say the word. Silence. Then a sound that sounded like a choked sob. Yes, she finally admitted. Abusive. That word has been haunting me. I never thought I would be the kind of person who would make someone feel that way. But you did, I said, without softening my words. You turned Laura's house into her prison. You treated her like a maid, and when she tried to defend herself, you made her feel like she was the one who was wrong. I know, Rosalind said, her voice broken. I know now, and I don't know how to fix it. Robert won't answer my calls. Laura probably hates me, and I just want my son back. Then start by respecting his boundaries, I said firmly. Stop calling him 20 times a day. Stop sending him messages trying to make him feel guilty. Stop making this about you and your pain, and start acknowledging the pain you caused. But it hurts, Rosalind said in a broken voice. It hurts not being able to talk to my son. It hurts knowing I lost him. You haven't lost him, I replied. But you will if you keep doing the same thing. Robert needs space. He needs time to heal and strengthen his marriage. And if you truly love him, you'll give him that time unconditionally. And what if he never forgives me? Then you'll have to live with the consequences of your actions, I said mercilessly. Just as Laura had to live with the consequences of your abuse for 2 weeks. Just as Robert now has to live with the guilt of not having defended her sooner. There was a long silence. I could hear her ragged breathing, her contained sobs. What should I do? She finally asked. How do I fix it? Start by writing him a letter, I suggested. Not a text message, not a call. A real letter where you take responsibility for your actions without excuses, without justifications. Where you specifically acknowledge what you did wrong and how it affected Laura. And then you give him space to decide if he wants to respond or not. And if he doesn't respond, then you respect his silence. And you continue to work on yourself, on understanding why you did what you did, so you never do the same thing again. All right, Rosalind said in a small voice. I'll do it. I'll write the letter. Rosalind, I said before hanging up. One more thing. If this is another manipulation, if you are trying to find a way to regain control over Robert, I'm warning you now. It won't work. Laura and I are watching, and we won't let you hurt her again. It's not manipulation, she said quickly. I promise you. I just want my son back. And if that means changing, then I'll change. I hung up the phone, not knowing whether to believe her or not. Time would tell. Manipulators can fake repentance, but they can't sustain it for long. Eventually, their true colours reappear. 1 month after the whole incident, Laura invited me to the property for lunch. When I arrived, I barely recognised the place. They had planted new flowers in the garden. The walls were freshly painted a soft yellow. There were new curtains on the windows, a new table in the dining room, and the whole house smelled clean and new beginnings. Do you like it? Laura asked with a bright smile that I hadn't seen on her face in months. Robert and I have been renovating every corner. We wanted it to feel like a new place, without memories of what happened. It's beautiful, I said honestly. It feels like a real home. Robert came out of the kitchen with a tray of iced tea. He looked different too, more relaxed, more present. He greeted me with a sincere hug. Alice, thanks for coming. Laura was excited to show you everything. We sat in the garden under the shade of the fig tree. Laura told me about her plans to start her home baking business, something she had always dreamed of, but never had the courage to try. Robert had built a small additional oven in the kitchen specifically for her. And your mother? I eventually asked, the question that had been floating in the air. Robert sighed. She sent the letter you suggested. It was difficult to read. She acknowledged everything without excuses. She specifically apologized to Laura for everything she did, and she said she understood if we didn't want to have contact with her. And what did you decide? We responded, Laura said. We told her we appreciated the apology, but we needed time. That when we were ready, we could meet in a neutral place for short periods. But that she would never be welcome in our house again, unless she showed with actions, not just words, that she had changed. And she accepted. Yes, Robert said. She said she would wait as long as necessary, that she would do whatever it took to rebuild trust. We'll see, I said with skepticism. Time will tell if she's sincere. I know, Robert nodded. That's why we're not rushing. Laura is my priority now, and if my mother can't respect that, then she'll have to live with the consequences. We spent the afternoon eating, laughing, sharing stories. It was the first time in a long time that I had seen Laura truly happy, truly at peace, and seeing Robert look at her with that protective love, with that genuine attention, gave me hope that maybe this marriage could survive after all. When I was about to leave, Laura stopped me on the porch. Mum, she said, taking my hands in hers, I've never properly thanked you for what you did, for coming that day, for defending me when I couldn't defend myself. You don't have to thank me, I said. That's what mothers do. No, she insisted. Not all mothers do that. Many women your age would stay quiet. They would say it's not their problem, that married daughters must resolve their own conflicts. But you came. You confronted an entire family for me. You risked Robert leaving me. You risked making things worse. But you did it anyway, because you knew it was the right thing to do. I felt tears stinging my eyes. You are my daughter, I said simply. And no one, absolutely no one, has the right to treat you the way they treated you. If I hadn't intervened, if I had let you stay in that situation, I would never have forgiven myself. We hugged tightly, mother and daughter, survivors of different storms, but united by an unbreakable love. I love you, Mum, Laura whispered, and I love you, sweetheart. Always. I drove back to the city as the sun began to set, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. I thought about everything that had happened in the last month, how a situation that seemed desperate had found its resolution, how my daughter had regained her voice, her strength, her home. I didn't know what would happen with Rosalind, if she would truly change or if she would eventually show her true nature again. But that didn't matter as much anymore, because now Laura knew how to defend herself. Robert knew how to protect her, and I knew that I had done the right thing. There are moments in life where love means being kind and patient, and there are moments where love means being fierce and unyielding. That day at the property, I had been both. I had been the mother my daughter needed in her darkest hour. And as I drove through the city's illuminated streets, with the soft sound of the radio filling the silence, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Pride in myself, in my daughter, in the strong woman I had raised. Because at the end of the day, that's what mothers do. We teach our daughters to be strong. We show them that they have worth, that they deserve respect, that no relationship is worth it if it comes at the expense of their dignity. And when they forget those lessons, when life hits them so hard that they lose sight of who they are, we are there to remind them. We are there to tell them, get up, you are stronger than you think, and I will be by your side while you fight. Because that is what it means to be a mother. It's not just giving life. It's teaching how to live with dignity. It's showing by example that there are battles worth fighting. It's being the shield when they don't have the strength to defend themselves, and being the mirror that reminds them who they really are when the world tries to make them forget. I arrived at my apartment that night, feeling the weight of my 70 years, but also feeling something younger, more vital. I had spent almost all my savings on that property. I had risked my relationship with my daughter's husband. I had confronted an entire family without fear, and I would do it all again without a second thought. Because that house, that property I bought with a lifetime of work, was not just a piece of real estate. It was a symbol of independence, of security, of a woman's ability to have something no one can take away from her. And when that security was threatened, when that refuge turned into a prison, I did what any mother would do for her daughter. I gave her back her home. I gave her back her voice. I gave her back her life. And in the process, I taught her the most important lesson of all, that no matter how old you are, no matter how many times you have fallen, you always, always have the right and the power to get up and say, no more. That night, before going to sleep, I received one last text message from Laura. It was a photo of her and Robert in the garden, hugging, genuinely smiling. And below the photo, 3 words. Thanks for everything. I smiled, put away my phone, and closed my eyes knowing that my daughter was finally okay, that her house was truly hers, that her life belonged to her, and that if she ever needed me again, I would be there in 5 minutes, ready to fight again. Because that's what mothers do. We don't give up. We don't back down. And we never, ever let anyone hurt our daughters without consequences. Never.